What's up, Internet? We have to talk. Chromehounds, more specifically Chromehounds 2, I believe could be a fantastic new game that would just be a juggernaut in the current ecosystem of video games that we have right now for PC, Xbox, PlayStation, uh, and it could also be a great esports title just based on how the game is developed and designed. I'm going to try to keep this video as quick as possible to try and keep it more easily digestible. So I'm going to skip over a lot of important details, and if you want to learn more about the game as a whole, have more of a in-depth description of it, there are many other videos that have been made about this game, reviews by people such as Angry Joe. He made a review about this game many years ago. So if you want to learn more about it and then come back to this video, that's fine. But this is just an initial brief overview of the game and the systems in it to kind of help set the groundwork for what I'm going to explain later in the video about why this game could be so groundbreaking if released again or a sequel made. So this game is basically a combat simulator where you make your own mobile walking tank and you fight other people who are on opposite teams. So you start the game, you play single player first. That's how it works. You go single player to multiplayer. And the way the single player starts out is that it introduces you to the game, and then you play one chapter for each style of mech that they have. There's 6 in total. There's Scout, Sniper, Soldier, Defender, Heavy Gunner, and then Commander. So those are the different kind of styles that you can play. You don't have to pick a specific class, but this is the developer's way of making this game, giving it kind of a rough guideline, a framework for what types of mechs you can build, because they're completely custom. You can build basically whatever you want. So the game, how it works as a whole, is you spawn on a map which looks something like this. This is kind of like a lot of maps. There's many different maps, but this is kind of like a standard one. So this map, if you're looking at it, it's got, little rivers, and then it's got the lighter shades are elevations, so cliffs, mountains, peaks, and you can you spawn into there with your mech that you've created, and then you fight for control of the map. So you can either capture the different radio communication towers that are on there at the end of the match. Whichever team has the most radio communication towers, or combus towers, they will win. There's 2 other ways. You can either destroy all the enemy mechs, obviously, team elimination, you win that way, or you can destroy the enemy team's base. That one is a little bit more complicated because there are multiple bases for each team, and there's only one true base. The rest are decoys. So there's subtle ways to tell which base is the correct one, and if you destroy that base, it's game over. The enemy team loses. It's pretty simple and straightforward. The radio communication towers were they had multiple levels of interactivity with the player. They weren't simply used for communication, which was a big role, but they were also used for giving sight of the commander to use their own radio communication tower to see where friendly and enemy mechs were on the map. And the only way you could have that ability is if you had the specific module on your mech, which would make you a commander just by a vague reference. So this game had it so that when you would spawn in, you wouldn't be able to communicate with your team at all. You could see them spawn next to you on the map, but you would have to capture communication towers to be able to talk, to communicate. The Xbox 360 released a feature called Party Chat soon after this game was released, which kind of killed that part of the game, which I think really cut the legs out from under this game. But without that, with a kind of standard communication just exclusively locked to in-game chat, you could have that kind of dynamic gameplay where you need these radio communication towers to fight and have good communication between your team and to help win the match. So you would spawn in, fight over the resources in the map, then that was it. And it's pretty straightforward, but there's other layers to it that come later on that I'll explain. But that's just kind of like the general theme. So I want to talk about the different classes now. Start out with Scout. Scout is a very simple idea, is a very mobile scouting class. You would drive around in a very fast, light, small mech, and either your main role would be to gather intel about where the enemy mechs are. If you didn't have a commander, you didn't have to play as one. You could play anything you want. You can figure out where the enemy mechs are, relay that to your teammates, and capture radio communication towers very fast, faster than anybody else. So that was your main role as a scout. They were very light, fast, agile. They had small, light-powered weapons, and they had their own good role that they stuck to, and it was very useful to have at least one of them. You then had the snipers, which is like any other sniper in any other game. They excelled at long-range combat. Their rifles had scopes on them that would make it easy to shoot at long range compared to any other weapon. And you could put a sniper rifle on a scout if you wanted to, but it would shoot too much. It'd be too powerful because the mechs are designed in such a way when you build them with the parts that you collect, you would have to make sure that you have certain weight tolerances met. So it didn't, when you would shoot the rifle, it wouldn't kick your mech, the chassis, like up into the air and screw up your aim. The heavier the mech was, the more resistant it was to the kickback of different weapons. So heavier mechs had bigger weapons, lighter mechs had smaller weapons. Makes sense. Sniper, long-range combat, pretty self-explanatory. Soldier. They were the kind of bog standard, average armor, run-of-the-mill mech that you would play. They used mostly cannons and rifles, so it was kind of like medium range they were pretty good at. They could take a decent amount of damage, and if you weren't paying attention and if you didn't build your mech correctly and expose critical components, they could destroy them and kill you pretty quick if they were good. But yeah, soldiers, it's just kind of like your box standard average mech. Then you have defenders. Defenders are good because they had pretty heavy armor, and they also were, you would know a defender by seeing them with tank treads. They were despite the fact that they had heavy armor and they weren't the fastest, they could maneuver and twist their chassis very easily, so they were able to defend against multiple mechs very easily. That's why they were called defender. And a lot of them used a lot of AoE weapons like grenade launchers and stuff like that, and they also used things like heat-seeking missiles, which I always thought was really fun. And they would sit at important spots in the map, whether it be your base, your home base, or specific communication towers that you needed to keep because it helped the flow of the map, stuff like that. They would be very good at kind of maneuvering smoothly in and out from behind cover and taking pot shots and then just fading back, and they were very good at doing that. The heavy gunner, my personal favorite, is the biggest, heaviest mech type that you can make. And because of that, you can use the biggest, heaviest, most powerful weapons in the game, which were howitzers. Just gigantic, huge cannons that you could strap onto your mech to shoot across the map to destroy enemies or buildings, like the enemy base, at long, long, long distance. And that was one of the ways that I preferred to fight in the games. I would have my team go out. They would try to figure out where the enemy base was, I would maneuver my mech into a spot on the map where I know that I could reach it with as much distance as possible, and I would just start shooting shells from across the sky and just boom, just bombard the enemy base and destroy it. That was how we chose to win a lot of our battles, because it was, once the shells are in the air, you can't stop it. And if you get good enough, you can kind of eyeball it really easily, because that's kind of what you had to do. You had to get good enough to realize where the shells were landing, if not just see. If you're aiming too high, see where it is and just adjust manually. Then you had the commander, the most influential mech build type class of this game. They had, as I mentioned earlier, a kind of mobile radio communication tower, mobile compass tower that they could bolt onto their mech. They came in different sizes. They were pretty heavy though, so you had to have a beefier mech, like a kind of like a defender, to carry this thing, and it would give you a sphere of a circle of influence around your mech. Depending on how big it was, you had more or less, and you could communicate with your teammates within that circle, and you could see what other enemies or friendlies were in that area, and it would extend with the radio, the compass towers that you had throughout the map. So if you were in the area of influence of one of the radio communication towers, it would just kind of chain to all of them. So that's why the radio communication towers were also important. It would extend the sight range of your commander, so they could see more of the battlefield and give better call-outs for what area on the map each player is in, and help you strategize a better way to victory. It was a really, really good, it was a good idea, I think. It really helped that class specifically get more fleshed out. And you didn't need to have one, but you noticed a handicap if you didn't have one. Also, there was a way to cloak yourself from the commander's radio sight. There was a cloaking gadget that you could put on your mech and toggle it on and off. And if you wanted to, you could just have a couple scouts toggle that on and off, hunt on the map for the enemy commander, and just nuke him down really quick, just ambush him. He would not see it coming, and he'd just be caught off guard unless he had someone there backing him up. So there's another valid strategy. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of play between the classes and do that kind of stuff. It was a very, very well balanced game, very strategic and competitive. So that's kind of like a general quick overview of the game and the classes and stuff. Now we need to talk about the online play. The biggest chunk, the most popular, the reason why people like this game was because of the multiplayer. Single player was good. It was more of a tutorial than anything. The game opened up and gave more functionality when you played multiplayer. How it worked is when you would load up the multiplayer section, you would be presented with a map. It would look like a map on a globe, or on like a proper map. And you would see a coastline and different chunks of like a countryside. And it would have 3 countries that you could pick to join either one of them. And every week you would play for your nation that you chose. You would play and battle to try and get as many control points across this giant map as possible and win the war. So there was like 20 or 30 different spots, something like that you could play. And depending on how many victories each nation had, they would build up points, and the more points you had, then you would be awarded with the capture of that territory. And the goal is to work your way in the best way possible, the path of least resistance, to the enemy capital. Each nation had a capital, and when you get to the enemy capital, if you destroy all the spots in the capital, you take it over, and then you gain all the locations that that country had and wipe them out. They have the ability to kind of rally and come back, but it's a real hard uphill battle from that point. So for the most part, once you defeat a nation, it's pretty hard to come back from that. That was the overall game that you had when you were playing on multiplayer. So, and at the end of every week, you would have awards like a leaderboard pop up, and there would be stuff like this. Like this These are most of the medals that they had in the game. And at the end of every week, they would have a cascading list of different players, the names, the ranks and stuff, and say which medals they won. So it would just add to the notoriety of different players across the game and the servers that you would play on. And it would just make it that much more enticing to get this stuff done, get these medals, because it would show up as achievements on your account that you have this medal. So this game has, like I said before, inherent ways of being competitive and working with teams, and there weren't any games really that were like this back then, 2006. This game came out at a time when games like Gears of War were released on Xbox 360. When Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was released on Xbox, this is all Xbox 360 games. Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, Rainbow Six Vegas, Splinter Cell Double Agent, Dead Rising, Fear, Hitman Blood Money. There are a lot of really, really, really good games that were released this year, just coincidentally the same year that Chromehounds was. And I think that combined with the fact that the party chat killed a major function of the multiplayer for this, enabling players to not rely on communication towers to actually speak to each other. This game was just set up for failure. But now, in this current ecosystem that we have, especially now that competitive video games are, esports are a billion-dollar industry now, and they help propel games like Fortnite, League of Legends, a game that I enjoy a lot is Rainbow Six Siege. They propel these games to not just be good games just because they're popular, but because they're also competitive, and that just adds to it. It's just like throwing fuel on a fire. And this game has the ability to be in a unique position to capitalize on a lot of things. For example, cross-platform play. We see hardly any games, especially competitive games, that are cross-platform, as in like Xbox, PlayStation, PC, Nintendo, but they're very exclusive. They only like their own stuff. But for the main point, Xbox, PC, PlayStation, because mouse and keyboard offer such a high advantage when it comes to precision and amount of actions you can do compared to a joystick and controller, it's unfair. But Chromehounds, the way you play the game, your crosshairs that you have for your different guns, the speed at which they rotate is based on the parts that you build your mech with. So if it's heavier, it will be slower. If it's lighter, it will be faster. But it's not to the point of like CSGO, another popular esports title, where you move your mouse and immediately the crosshair moves within like a second. It doesn't work that way. You would have to drag your cursor across the screen, and it would make it feel as if you're in a tank, like a real tank. So you're maneuvering slowly back and forth, and you could easily replicate that with a mouse, and it worked on joystick on the controller. So that playing field is level. And a keyboard there weren't that many actions you could perform in your mech, so having the extra keys around your hand, it didn't provide that much advantage either. And they did a good job with the controller layout for the most part, I believe. And the controls of this game already make it so that if the developers wanted to, they could make this cross-platform and have people on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox play each other. And that would help the longevity of this game, because the consoles, depending on which generation you're at, the backwards compatibility limits the amount of games that they have to play. So it would keep it relevant much longer, which helps the game. And it would be competitive. So it could be an esports title, which helps the game. Another thing, this game could be, I think, if something else doesn't happen, the game that would bring VR into the forefront of gaming where it should be, where a lot of people want it to be. I personally don't like VR because I get motion sickness very easily with that stuff, but it would be so immersive to have your headset on while you're playing with like a Steel Battalion. That's another great mech game. I have a copy of it with the controller, this giant controller that's like this wide, and it's got 2 joysticks, a throttle, like 30 or 40 different buttons that control the different aspects of functions in your mech, and a foot pedal system. So it's got 3 foot pedals, one for go, one for stop, and then one for like jump and like strafe left and right for like quick maneuver. You could have that control this game as well and have it be like the competitive version of this game, like it would be in the Ready Player One movie, where I believe it was the Sixers is what they called them, where they would get into those suits, those stations, those battle stations. You could have that for this game, and it would just add to the appeal, I think, in my opinion. I think I would enjoy watching it more, seeing people play in these kind of battle stations for this game. I think that would be so much fun, especially if you could get it for casual gamers, people at home. That would just add to the immersion of the game and would make it so much more appealing to play. So you have cross-platform ease. You have the inherent competitive nature just by the initial design of this game without any extra work. And then you have the ease of translation over to VR. This game is set up for success in many different ways, and I think it would be a crying shame if the developers, who is From Software, by the way, would not publish this game again. I believe the rights are owned by Sega. I believe Sega was the publisher and From Software was the developer. But From Software, they're not amateurs. They're not like a one-hit wonder company. They make games like Armored Core, which is another very popular mech game series. They made the Dark Souls series, Bloodborne. They're good. They're seasoned developers. If anybody could do this, they could. And all they would have to do was take their original idea of Chromehounds, take the original game, polish it up just slightly, like a little bit of graphical updates, nothing like cyberpunk kind of level, but something to where it looks a little bit more modern, the UI cleaned up just a little bit, but not change hardly anything on it, and then just re-release it and watch it explode. And I would bet money, if they did it correctly, I would bet money that this game would be a huge success across all consoles that it was available on and on PC. Because there's nothing else like this out there right now. There is Mech Warrior, like Mech Warrior Online, which is pretty close, but it's not to this level. And then there was another game that was made, it's called Mav. It was a indie developed game by people who loved Chromehounds. But people can't play Chromehounds anymore because they turned off the servers a few years after the game was released, so we can't play the game in the multiplayer section, which is the main chunk of the game. They turned them off because the popularity for the game wasn't there, for the reasons that I said it was kind of handicapped. So if the developers were to somehow get this idea and realize they're sitting on just a giant pot of gold, just waiting, like it takes almost no effort to redo this game and re-release it, I think it's worth the effort of trying to get this video in front of as many eyes as possible. And if you agree, if you like Chromehounds, or if you like other games like Chromehounds and you enjoy competitive gaming and you want to see a new, fresh entry into that area, please share this video with as many people as you can who you think would be interested, who might be able to get this in front of as many eyeballs as possible. Share this video, and maybe, if we're lucky, if we get enough traction behind this, we could get the developers to kind of take an eye at it and potentially realize that they're sitting on a great opportunity that is set up for success, and make a awesome new game that a lot of people, I think, would enjoy to play. And also, most importantly, it would make them a lot of money. A lot of money. So that's about the extent of it. I will be posting this video on the Chromehounds 2 subreddit. So if you want to find me there or find the video there, ask any questions or clarify things, whatever, or if you want a longer in-depth video or anything like that, just if you'd like to hear me ramble, you can find me there. But that's all I got for you. Thank you for watching.